Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have three martinis today. They're probably closely related to good, bad, and crazy. All three of them will deal with the passing of Arizona Republican Senator John McCain on Saturday in a number of different ways. We want to let you know that we're sponsored today by Simple Contacts. Right now, Three Martini Lunch listeners can get $20 off your first order of contacts at simplecontacts.com/martini20 or enter the code martini20 at checkout. A little bit more on that later in the podcast. And Jim, we found out Saturday evening, just a little more than 24 hours after we heard that the senator was discontinuing cancer treatment, that he had passed away at his home in Arizona. The coverage at that time, of course, went wall to wall. And that's been a big focus of the political discussion in print and on the air ever since. And we said on Friday that it was too soon to talk about his political legacy. When the news broke and you saw some people left and right, unfortunately, in a good mood over this terrible news, that was quite disturbing. But this whole week will be John McCain lying in state in Arizona, John McCain lying in state at the U.S. Capitol, and then the service at the National Cathedral, and ultimately burial at Annapolis later in the week, I believe, on Sunday, actually. And so now is the time to kind of look at his legacy, political and otherwise, and examine where he stacked up in the minds of conservatives. And obviously different conservatives will come down on different issues. And I've got a fairly quick checklist here. I'm not going to go deeply into these things, but pros, things that conservatives should be pretty happy with John McCain on. There were two pretty controversial nominations not too far into his Senate career, Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas. Bork didn't make it. Thomas did. McCain voted for both of them. He was one of the biggest opponents of pork, even for the military. He was very careful about where the taxpayers' dollar was going. He supported the surge when no Democrats did, hardly, except for Joe Lieberman. And many in his Republican Party thought perhaps we were digging a deeper hole, but it had to be done, and he took the heat for that. Probably ended up getting him the nomination, quite frankly, in 2008. He opposed ending Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which I think social conservatives will appreciate. He was consistently pro-life with one diversion on stem cells, and he backed Neil Gorsuch and seemed to support Brett Kavanaugh, although he didn't live long enough to actually cast a vote. On the con side, he led the effort for campaign finance reform, which a lot of people thought was curbing of free speech. He was for more government and health care. As you point out today in the Jolt, he was for tobacco settlements. He opposed both Bush tax cuts. He was fond of joining local gangs, Jim, one of 14, one of 8, neither of which conservatives liked too much, the first on judicial nominations, the other on immigration. Killed the Obamacare repeal, and one of the last things he did. And, of course, his military career is what hopefully most folks can agree on. Anybody who would refuse to get out of the Hanoi Hilton because it wasn't fair that he was the son of an admiral ought to be universally praised. So a quick checklist there. What comes to mind for you?
John McCain offered us a lot of life lessons, perhaps high among them that if you join a gang, bad things will follow. More seriously, though, I was thinking about his passing over the weekend, and I was thinking about, you look at what John McCain went through in Vietnam. Not just the imprisonment, not just the torture, not just the permanent disability, but after all of that, to return to a country that I don't think anybody left, right, or center would dispute, we did not treat returning Vietnam veterans the way this country should have. We all heard the anecdotes of them being spat upon and insulted and sneered at, portrayed as lunatics and damaged by war and all that kind of stuff. I mean, imagine going through everything McCain goes to, and then you come back and your country doesn't appreciate it. Your country doesn't believe that this was in the name of a good cause. Your country believes, perhaps because of the experiences of Cali and other events during the Vietnam War, that you're the bad guy. You were the villain. You were the problem over there. If anyone ever had an excuse for being bitter, if everyone ever had an excuse for being angry, for stopping to love their country, for starting to be angry at their country, John McCain had it. And yet he didn't do that. And obviously, he talked about going through wild and crazy years. And he basically said that, look, the failure of his first marriage was entirely his own fault as he perceives it and remembers it. But look, John McCain realized there was a lot more he could do with his life in the time that he had on this earth. And I think he did some I don't think anyone could dispute. He did some extraordinary things. And all in all, whatever you thought of his politics represents the very essence of a life well lived. One of dedication, one of courage, One of, and you and I have been very honest about, driving us crazy sometimes. We did not always agree with him. I was thinking about this, and I wrote about this a bit in the Morning Jolt. That, on the one hand, people loved that slogan from the 2008 campaign, "Country First," that also kind of encapsulates why it was difficult to disagree with John McCain and why he could be so infuriating to disagree with. Once he set his compass to true north, once he felt he had figured out the right course of action, it was very hard to deter. He was absolutely adamant that it was the best thing for the country, and that if you disagreed with him, you weren't putting country first. So let's acknowledge that John McCain could really anger those who are on the other side of him on any given issue, left, right, or center. Having said that, in the end, he did everything because he loved his country. He did everything because he wanted to make this country a better place. He showed unflinching dedication to the men and women in uniform, and certainly, as in my book, came down on the right side of most issues, with some notable exceptions. This is a country that was lucky to have John McCain. It was lucky to have John McCain continuing to serve it after his time in Vietnam. And my fear, Greg, is we will not see the likes of him anytime soon. He was a true maverick, a true one of a kind, and he will be missed, not just in the halls of the Senate, but I think just in our entire political discourse, for his happy warrior persona and the set of values he tried to live up to and espouse throughout his career.
We'll talk about the media here in just a second, but one of the reasons most conservatives know a lot more about the things that John McCain frustrated them over is because the media highlighted those. They loved it when he bucked the Republican leadership. When he went along with them, which he did most of the time, that didn't get much attention at all. But on some critical issues, there was some conflict, I guess, whether it's the gangs or the last vote on the Obamacare repeal or some other things. You could say it's like the Facebook relationship status. It's complicated when it comes to policy, but like you said, his love for America and how he comported himself in the Hanoi Hilton, of course, is to be greatly admired. Jim, we'll talk more about John McCain in just a second. A quick note here for Simple Contacts. Simple Contacts is the most convenient way to renew your contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere in minutes. It is vision care for the 21st century. The Simple Contacts vision test is self-guided and takes less than 5 minutes. Think of how much time you save compared to making an appointment, getting to the eye doctor, and taking time off and more. It's designed by doctors, and licensed ophthalmologists review every test carefully to make sure your eyes look healthy and that your vision hasn't changed. This isn't a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam. That's important to know, but it's a great option for times in between those regular eye doctor visits.
Simple Contacts has all the brands and types of lenses that you're familiar with, so you never have to shop around to find your lenses at the best price. Simple Contacts has been rated 5 stars more than 4,500 times on the App Store. You can text with the support team and always get to speak with a person. There are no automated robot systems here. Come on, it's summer and there's no shortage of reasons to have your contacts on hand, whether it's beach days, vacations, outdoor activities, weddings. Use Simple Contacts to stock up for the season. The vision test is just $20. Now compare that with an appointment, which without insurance could cost you up to $200. The contact lens prices are unbeatable. Standard shipping is free. And best of all, we're offering a promotion to our listeners.
Right now, 3 Martini Lunch listeners can get $20 off your first order of contacts at simplecontacts.com/martini20 or enter code martini20 at checkout. That's simplecontacts.com/martini20 or enter the promo code martini20 at checkout to get $20 off your first order of contacts. And so, Jim, we were just saying in the first Martini that the media's treatment of John McCain was also complicated. You did a great job here in the Morning Jolt on Monday explaining that while the media is lavishing praise on John McCain now, it wasn't always that way. Many times it was, because when there were controversial issues where McCain did not side with the Republicans, he got a whole lot of attention from the media. But once he became the Republican nominee, oh boy, things changed pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think really to go back to it, you have to go back to McCain-Feingold in the late 90s. McCain no doubt felt that he was scarred by his experience with the Keating Five. I think you could make a strong argument that McCain was the least involved in that particular influence scandal, but he had the passion of a convert, and he was converted to the cause. And by golly, if we had to limit people's right to have political speech before an election, that was what we had to do in order to clean up our politics. This debate kind of faded into history. But back in the late 90s, there was a very big dispute about settlements from America's tobacco companies. And I don't think there was any much dispute that tobacco was addictive, and nobody thought particularly highly of tobacco companies. But if you subscribe to the philosophy of Christopher Buckley's "Thank You for Smoking," almost anybody would believe, people die in fires from smoke inhalation. So if you light a small thing and inhale smoke, it's reasonable to expect there will be some health consequences. But a lot of folks on the left, including the Clinton administration, believe that this was a chance to get a small fortune from these companies in a forced settlement outside of a courtroom, and basically use that to spend on any kind of public health initiatives that they wanted to do. And most Republicans thought that this was a bad idea, that this was basically almost a form of extortion, that this was just basically an expansion of government. And John McCain was very much on board with that. He very much believed the tobacco companies had done terrible things, and it was the job of government to make them give up massive amounts of money and put them in the hands of government and nonprofits and to mitigate the effects of smoking. But the real issue, McCain became a major national figure in 2000. Most folks on the Republican side got scared off by the war chest and the name ID and the various other institutional advantages that George W. Bush had in 2000. And it was interesting. We talk about the Republican candidate for people who don't really like Republicans, the John Huntsmans, the John Kasichs. There's something about guys named John who hired John Weaver as a consultant, and John McCain was the original back in 2000. I remember reading an endorsement of John McCain in the New Republic. The New Republic, a generally left-of-center magazine, didn't usually weigh in Republican primaries, but it said that John McCain offered a path of redemption for his party. That was how the media saw John McCain in 2000. Bush was part of the problem. Bush was terrible. Bush was the restoration of the dynasty, et cetera, et cetera. But McCain was good and honorable, mostly because of campaign finance reform and these other areas where he deviated from party orthodoxy. And in fact, I remember people debating, insisting that John McCain had to be pro-choice. He was not. He was pretty darn consistently pro-life his entire life. But he just seemed so reasonable in the eyes of the media that they insisted he had to be, he had to support gay rights. He had to be pro-choice. He had to be one of us. John McCain was quite a bit more conservative than the glowing media coverage would suggest. And of course, he was nowhere near as conservative as the hostile media coverage would suggest in 2008. 2008, I'm sure, came as a rude surprise to the senator, because the media that had adored him throughout the entire Straight Talk Express of 2000 and for most of the Bush years suddenly turned on him with a vengeance the moment he was the alternative to Barack Obama. And I think that's one of the points I kind of want to emphasize in today's Jolt, was that recognition of McCain was more or less the same guy throughout. If you loved him in 2000, there was no reason for you not to love him in 2008. And if you didn't like him in 2000, I don't really see why you would suddenly, have a dramatic change of opinion in subsequent years. But in the end, the media defined McCain in context or in contrast to some other figure. When it was McCain versus Bush, he was the hero. When it was McCain versus Obama, he was the villain. And obviously in his later years, when he became an outspoken critic of President Trump, he became the hero again. And here's the thing. My sense is McCain is the same guy all throughout. And if you like him, like him. If you don't like him, don't like him. Don't change your position based on whether he's good to your side or not. It just seems very deeply cynical. I went back and found that, Chuck Schumer, who's now pledging to rename Russell Senate office building off of him, was tearing it to him in 2008 and said he had $500 shoes and he couldn't understand the problems of the average American. He wasn't particularly concerned about the problems of an average American. He just went into it over and over again. So it just seems just remarkably opportunistic. And I would just like everybody to kind of sit back and realize, maybe we were a little unfair to John McCain back in 2008. Maybe he wasn't that crazy grandpa warmonger who was insisted on being portrayed by the mainstream and left of center press in 2008. I think that was kind of if you want to wonder about how American politics got to this stage, I think you can point to various good men who were right of center, Bush, McCain, Romney, all getting portrayed as history's greatest monster in presidential cycles. And Republican voters saying, you know what, if our nominee is always going to be portrayed as a monster, we might as well get the advantages of the monster. So I like to see a little more contemplation after this, Greg, but I'm not optimistic that we're going to see it.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath there, because that's just not the way the media works. I mean, they had Hillary Clinton as their darling until Obama became competitive that year. And as soon as she was yesterday's news. They kicked her to the curb. And if they're willing to kick Hillary Clinton to the curb, you knew they weren't going to have any mercy for John McCain. And so they made up fake stories about extramarital affairs and all sorts of other things. At some point, I read over the weekend, they compared him to George Wallace. It's just absolutely despicable things. And of course, no mea culpas, no reflection at any point.
It'd be nice if we could just say, the nominee of my of the party I oppose is wrong. I think this person is flawed. I think this person would make a bad president. But they're not history's greatest monster. They're not terrible people. They just happen to be, mistaken or misguided or just, flat out, maybe even foolish in their thinking, but they're not horrible people. I suspect that particularly in the case of McCain, because he had this well-covered narrative of being a hero, of making sacrifices that few other Americans were willing to make, that they had to go even more over the top. That he, it was really kind of fascinating when you watch reading this morning a Rolling Stone profile from 2008, insisting that this was all an act, that McCain did not really believe in any higher cause, that his only purpose was serving his own ambitions. How far up what does your head have to be to write stuff like that? But anyway, that's where we are with McCain, and it's a deeply frustrating display that whoever the most right figure on the national scene is, that person will be villainized entirely separate from what the character and what their actual positions are.
Yeah. You saw it in the last debate he really took part in, which was the Obamacare repeal. According to the media, he was detestable for agreeing to open debate on the skinny repeal. They were absolutely foaming at the mouth over that. And then a few days later, once they had gone through the amendment process, I think killing most, if not all of them, and he voted no on final passage, all of a sudden he's the great conquering hero who's doing the right thing for his country. So just... Now, the media is patting itself on the back here while they're trying to say nice things about John McCain. They were self-serving every step of the way. All right, Jim, let's move to our crazy martini now. And unfortunately, while the media is doing some revisionist history, the President of the United States not doing himself any favors also. I mean, we know these guys don't like each other. It goes all the way back to Trump in Iowa shortly after he announced his presidential candidacy, saying he didn't think that McCain was a hero because he got captured. He likes people who don't get captured, and never really recovered from that. McCain, obviously, we just mentioned a moment ago with the health care vote. He's also got a role in passing the Steele dossier along to the FBI, which I'm sure is really what gets Trump's goat here, in addition to the health care vote. Ultimately, though, you would think there would be some decorum, some dignity, but apparently Trump spiked a official White House statement that would have gone a little bit more into McCain's legacy. Instead, he just sent out the very brief tweet that said, "My deepest sympathies and respect go out to the family of Senator John McCain. Our hearts and prayers are with you." And then as the news broke on Saturday evening, the flags at the White House were lowered to half staff. And then apparently as Trump returned to the White House, they went back up to full staff, even though, according to Mark Knoller, who keeps track of these things for CBS News, usually the flags will stay at half staff until the person is actually buried. So what do you make of the president's reaction to all this?
Well, Greg, I think listeners should know that you did not summarize President Trump's tweet about Senator McCain. You read it aloud in its entirety.
Yes.
It is 2 sentences. My deepest sympathies and respect go out to the family of Senator John McCain. Our hearts and prayers are with you. And to my knowledge, that is the entirety of both the presidential statement and the White House statement about Senator McCain. It is not an exaggeration to say the Vietnamese government has put out a clearer, more praising and more effusive statement about Senator McCain than the President of the United States is. Regarding the flags, I looked it up. Yes, technically, it is U.S. flag code that if a member of Congress passes away, the flag will be at half staff for the day of the death and the following day. He passed away on Saturday, Sunday. Here we are, Monday. Having said that, it's entirely up to the president to do it longer. The congressional flags will be at half staff for the until his McCain's burial. I believe the same was being instructed to the Pentagon. Between these two, it really looks like a absolute minimum check-the-box response to the passing of Senator McCain. And let's point out, we point out the tough, hard-fought presidential primary between George W. Bush and John McCain. And Bush is speaking at the funeral. Bush came to have a great personal warmth despite the at some points, very nasty nature of that primary fight. Barack Obama will be speaking at the funeral, and Obama issued a lengthy, effusive statement. What does President Trump think he loses if he issued a longer statement that said something akin to, I thank him for his many years in uniform, his courage was unsurpassed. We have the infamous statement, I like war heroes who didn't get captured. Trump has been offered many opportunities to see whether he's apologized for that statement. Trump clearly sees no reason to do that. Many people love to point out the bone spurs that kept Trump from getting drafted and things like that. What does Trump think he loses if he says something like John McCain was a fighter through and through, and I always respect? We can imagine lots of things that Donald Trump could come out and say, and he won't. It's really remarkable, Greg, the number of times you get into these arguments and people say he's the president of the United States, you have to respect the office. I would just kind of put the question out in light of this type of behavior. Does President Trump respect the office? Hey, what a lovely note to end Monday on.
Yeah.
At least it's Friday, Greg.
Oh, not even close, Jim. Sorry. Only Monday. But hopefully we'll get some cheerier news as the week goes on. Until then, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to visit our friends over at Simple Contacts, particularly if you need new contacts. And right now, our listeners can get $20 off your first order at simplecontacts.com/martini20 or enter the code martini20 at checkout. Tune in again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.